God of War Ragnarok will soon be here, as Kratos navigates his way through the Norse apocalypse. Yet, while the end times may be upon Kratos, there are those who hope to stop the coming final battle, including the greatest of the Aesir, Odin himself. While we never met Odin in God of War 2018, his presence was certainly felt in his impact. The most notable was upon Freya, Odin's former wife. And the tale of Odin and Freya, both in legend and the game, is a fraught one, and one which will lie at the center of God of War Ragnarok. So, my gods of lore, let's take a look at the history of Odin and Freya in Norse mythology, discuss how that compares to their God of War counterparts, and what that might mean for God of War Ragnarok. In myth, long ago, two tribes of Norse gods were at war with each other, the Aesir and the Vanir. Little was known about the Vanir, save that the war was long and painful for both sides. Eventually, though, the war came to an end, though we don't understand why. Many of the Vanir, including one called Freya, soon became friends with the Aesir, with Freya herself even being considered an honorary Aesir. This history is actually fleshed out slightly more in God of War's lore. In the game, the reason for the war ending was caused by the god Mimir's suggestion of a marriage between Odin, the king of the Aesir, and Freya, who in this version was the leader of the warrior Valkyries. This marriage would symbolize the end of fighting between the Vanir and the Aesir, something Freya agreed to in order to stop the bloodshed. This story makes the game's version of Freya an amalgamation with another god from Norse myth, the goddess Frigg, who in mythology was an Aesir who looked precisely like Freya, but was the one married to Odin. Some sources in Norse myth cite them as the same person, and others say that they were distinct gods, and this is a discrepancy that God of War itself would eventually play upon.
I always heard that Baldur's mother was Frigg.
Aye, Frigg. Well, that's more of a pet name, you see. It means beloved, something Odin called Freya after they wed. Out of affection at first, or so I like to believe.
In the game's world, Freya ultimately chooses to leave Odin due to his cruelty, causing Odin to cast her out of the Aesir and take her wings, leaving her to live alone in isolation.
We're here.
You live in a tree?
Not in it. Below it. Hemele!
Look!
It's alright.
Thus, the game explains the discrepancy between Freya and Frigg, as Freya plays the role of both Odin's wife and not. Yet, what motivated Odin's cruelty that led to Freya leaving him? While many depictions of Odin today in pop culture, like in the MCU movies, show him as a wise and kind ruler, in legend, Odin was nothing of the sort. Unlike Thor, who was seen as a god of the people and noble in his cause, Odin often saw himself above those in his charge. He enjoyed pitting gods and human beings against each other simply for fun, and to give him a chance to earn glory for himself in battle. To Odin, it was war and the deeds done therein that made men, not nobility, virtue, or honor. He was even the favorite god of outlaws, and those who like to live on the outside of society's rules, often helping them gain a legacy as warriors. So bad was Odin's reputation that he was even cast out by the Aesir from Asgard for 10 years at one point, despite him being their ruler. Yet, the Odin in God of War is perhaps even crueler than the one of legend, as instead of simply being an uncaring figure as he was in myth, in the world of the game, he manages to lead others to cruelty as well. In the backstory to God of War, Odin pushes Thor and the other Aesir into battle with the Jotun, the giants. He turns his own people into cruel soldiers, rather than just himself. Because if there's anything that this version of Odin seeks, it is power and fame above all.
But Odin's true face showed itself again in the end. Oh, he won Freya's trust, and she taught him some of her Vanir magic, another choice he would live to bitterly regret. Sadly, despite his wise counsellors' best efforts to persuade him that peace was the only true path to stave off Ragnarok, Odin never let go of his obsession with Jotunheim. The taste of Vanir magic led him to new forms of experimentation and new levels of depravity.
This desire for power, though, does match up with Odin in myth, who is willing to use any power at his disposal to get what he wants. Unlike Thor and many other Aesir who fight with strength and tools alone, Odin is happy to use magic, cunning, and trickery to stay in charge. He often finds himself walking the earth and other realms, searching for new ways to gain power for himself. If this sounds familiar to you, it should, as Odin is meant as a dark reflection of another Aesir, Loki. In myth, Loki met Odin for the first time as they were both wandering the 9 realms, eventually becoming blood brothers, a story I told in my video about Loki. Yet after Loki joined the Aesir, he was often considered the black sheep of the gods for his trickery and his playfulness, something that eventually bothered Loki so much that he drunkenly called out the gods one night for their hypocrisy. In retaliation, Odin called Loki not much of a man, accusing him of spending time on Earth as a woman and bearing children, saying that it betokes a base nature in Loki. Angry at this accusation, Loki calls Odin out for his own hypocrisy, saying, "But it is said, thou wentest with tottering steps in Samso, and knocked at houses as a Vala, a seeress. In likeness of a fortune teller, thou wentest amongst people. Now that, methinks, betokes a base nature." Loki here is saying that Odin was doing much the same as Loki, even using forbidden women's magic, like fortune telling, to gain wisdom. For Odin sought knowledge and the ability to learn about the future above all else.
If it's about the future, he adds it to his collection. Helps him style himself as all-seeing and all-knowing. But of course, the idea is control. Control of the future, control of his fate. He'd control every realm of every land in every world if he could. Every potential pocket of resistance, he seeks to eliminate.
And seeing the future is very much a concern of Odin in God of War. The reason Odin set Thor and the rest of the Aesir against the giants was in order to gain the giants' ability to read the future, as Odin wished to stop the coming of Ragnarok, as he knew the final battle at the end of the world was on its way and wanted to learn how to prevent it. And he knew one of the signs of it coming would be the death of his son, Balder. Yet Balder was Freya's son too, and she feared for his death. Not out of self-interest like Odin, but as a loving parent. So, Freya put a spell upon Balder, making him immortal, yet numbing him to all feeling and pain, and the ability to empathize with others.
Feasting, drinking, women, it's all gone.
You'll never
God!
feel pain again. Death has no power over you now. You would rather die?
Never feel again? Yes. Yes. I would rather die.
Yes.
Take it away, Mom.
I can't.
Please. Please, please take it away.
It doesn't work like that.
Instead of caring for Balder, Freya viewed him as an object that she wished to protect, instead of caring about his wants and desires. In many ways, Freya was displaying a selfishness more akin to Odin than she would want to admit. Yet Freya's spell caused Balder's invincibility, and it was a power that Odin took advantage of and used for himself, sending Balder as his agent to track down giants who had fled Odin's war. This eventually led Balder to Kratos, who Odin had sent after to look for Kratos' wife, a giant who had died before the beginning of the game, sending them off on an adventure where they eventually run into Freya herself, who helps them and even saves Atreus' life, much to her later regret. Because, as in myth, Atreus leads to the death of Balder. This was the one event that Freya feared most, yet it was caused by her empathy for Kratos and his son. If she hadn't saved Atreus, who was later revealed to be Loki, Balder might have survived. Because Loki was destined, both in Norse myth and in the game, to lead to Balder's death, and even has a role in the eventual fate of all the gods themselves, as it is said that Loki will lead an army of giants against Odin, leading to the final battle at Ragnarok. In Norse mythology, when Loki attacks Asgard with the giants, Odin will eventually be forced to start the final battle, leading to him fighting the great wolf Fenrir, who will swallow him whole, killing the Allfather. This knowledge of his future death during Ragnarok is perhaps why Odin, in the game, was watching Kratos through his ravens, as he always feared Balder's death, though not out of concern for his son's life, but for his fear of Ragnarok coming. Odin now knows who stands in his way if he wishes to survive and prevent his fate. Yet, this aligns him, once again, with Freya, who also seeks vengeance against the former Greek god of war and his son Atreus for killing her child Balder.
I will parade your cold body from every corner of every realm and feed
your soul to the vilest filth in hell! That is my promise!
He saved your life.
He robbed me of everything!
While empathy for others guides Freya, while Odin is deeply selfish, their paths and attention towards their son Balder still led them back to where they began, allied together against a common goal: to bring down the former Greek god of war. It is fitting then, perhaps, that in Norse myth, Odin and Freya also hold a particular title themselves: the god and goddess of war. And so this is where God of War Ragnarok begins, with the Norse gods of war about to face off against the former Greek god of war, and the battle may lead to the end of the world itself. But if you want to learn more about Norse mythology and how it may tie into God of War Ragnarok, don't forget to subscribe to GameSpot, as we'll have more God of Lore videos next week. And in the meantime, check out all of our coverage on God of War Ragnarok right here on GameSpot.